one of the most expensive purchases a person will ever make is the home that they live in, and it's important to make the right choice. It's a place that grants you privacy from the wider world, and is where you can be the true you without outside interference. And as you develop it, it will become a representation of who you are. While most buildings keep to certain expectations, there are those that push the limits of design and taste. Join me for today's video as we look at the top 15 worst house designs. Number 15. Transparent House, Tokyo. Japan's a country that's known for having very little space for each resident, and architects there make use of every square foot that's available to them. As a result, it's also the country where you'll find some of the most unusual home designs of all, such as this one that was built around 10 years ago in Tokyo. Known as the Transparent House, Su Fujimoto architects were inspired by our ancient ancestors who lived in trees when designing this 900 square foot or 85 square meter structure. Built from a white steel frame, it split up into separate living areas, and instead of having parallel floors, each of these are at varying heights, which encourages residents to climb between them. Probably the most shocking thing about this design, though, is the abundant use of glass instead of traditional materials like bricks. This certainly allows for more natural light to enter than most houses, but comes with a major drawback. There's virtually no privacy in the home whatsoever. It's ideal for people who want their neighbors to see everything they do at all times of the day, but for those who want to be able to shut off from the rest of the world, or presumably who want some level of protection against people breaking in, then this surely has to be the worst thing imaginable. Number 14. The Steel House, Lubbock, Texas. Around 20 minutes outside the town of Lubbock in Texas, eagle-eyed drivers will spot something rather strange on the horizon alongside the river. Beyond a series of regular two-story houses is the Steel House, an almost UFO-like structure. It was conceived and built by Robert Bruno, a sculptor who handcrafted every element from 1973 until his death in 2008. Stood on 4 legs on a ridge and with an astounding view over Lake Ransom Canyon, the house was made from more than 150 tons of blackened steel, with each part carefully welded by hand. The interior here is almost entirely decorated with wood, to the point where it feels like you're inside a treehouse. And most of the windows are made from ornate stained glass, which lights the inside with a wide range of colors. There's no avoiding the fact, though, it's a strange-looking house that you'd surely not want to be built anywhere near where you live, and it's incomplete despite the designer dedicating most of his life to it. He was unable to install the planned aquarium and swimming pool, and there are still various holes between the levels. But maybe, one day, a new owner may finally finish it, perhaps with the funds raised from conducting tours to those interested in seeing the monstrosity for themselves. Number 13. Habitat 67, Montreal, Canada. Considered to be an architectural landmark and one of the most recognizable buildings in Canada, Habitat 67 started off as a design made for an architect's master's thesis, but was then built in real life in Montreal as a pavilion for the World Fair Exposition in 1967. It's made up of 367 prefabricated concrete structures that are all identical but have been arranged in various different ways, reaching a maximum height of 12 stories. The combination of these structures created 146 residences, most of which are different sizes and configurations, and are made up of between 1 to 8 connected units. The idea of this design was to integrate the benefits of suburban homes, such as outdoor spaces, privacy, and fresh air, with the space constraints of an urban environment, and the hope was that it would become a blueprint for affordable housing in cities. The Habitat 67 structure itself was just the first stage of a much larger project, one that never came to fruition. Ultimately, it failed at what it was trying to achieve. Because of its notoriety, the units became too valuable, so it was hardly affordable living. And with all the gaps between units, it hardly made full use of all the space that was available too. Attempts to construct similar structures in other cities fell flat, not just because of the price involved, but because planning authorities rightly questioned whether something like Habitat 67 was really the aesthetic direction they wanted to go in. Number 12. The Crematorium, England. In 2014, images began circulating of a series of new homes that had been built in Dagenham, which is a town in Essex in the UK. But rather than being shared because they represented an amazing new concept, they became famous for completely the opposite reason. The 12 new terraced bungalows were built from red brick up to 20 feet or 6 meters high, But while you'd hope the aesthetics were taken into account with the design, it appears as if the looks were completely forgotten. With sharp edges, a box-like appearance, and for some odd reason, only 2 small windows in the front of each, locals soon began comparing them to a crematorium or a prison. What made matters worse was that they had been built in a community that was otherwise a beautiful area with some great examples of architecture from the past century. The local council, which was responsible for their construction to add extra homes for elderly people in need, admitted that functionality had been prioritized over everything else, and rather than agreeing to relook at things, instead announced that they would plant a row of trees so in a few years or decades they wouldn't be so ghastly to look at. Number 11. The Headington Shark, Oxford, England. The priorities of a homeowner are usually twofold. You want the perfect place and surroundings for you and your family to live, and you want your property to hold its value, so you won't have lost out when it comes time to sell it in the future. You can only imagine the horror of residents in part of Oxford, England in 1986, though, when as a commentary on local planning laws, and also to commemorate the 41st anniversary of the dropping of a nuclear bomb on Nagasaki in Japan, one of the neighbors decided to install an art piece on his roof. Working in collaboration with sculptor John Buckley, a 25-foot or 7.8-meter long fiberglass shark was built and installed headfirst into the house. Officially called Untitled 1986, it took 3 months to complete and was originally only meant to be there for a few months. Said to be a representation of the anger and desperation you'd feel if a shark tore a hole in your roof, similar to that felt by victims of a nuclear bomb, it soon became a powerful image for anti-war campaigners around the world. Because of this importance, the shark was allowed to stay in place and remains there today after several renovations. It certainly has an important message behind it, but also presumably has unintentionally become an example of how one person's actions can affect an entire community, no matter how many others object to it. Number 10. Hitler House, Swansea, Wales. The beauty of architecture is that designers can take the basic principles of a house and adjust and adapt them in almost any way that they want to create a new one-of-a-kind place for someone to live. It's pretty great to travel to communities around the globe to see how different the structures that people call home can be, but sometimes things don't exactly go to plan. If you were asked to think of what the worst thing your new house could be said to look like is, then you might suggest a boring, soulless box or a concrete monstrosity, and likening it to one of the worst and most murderous dictators of human history probably wouldn't even come to mind. But that's how this house in Swansea in Wales has been described, and it's hard to argue any different. Rather than being one house, it's actually been split to form 2 apartments, and each one is available to rent for around $120 per week. The slanted roof, along with the windows and position of the ledge above the doors, certainly feel like the structural equivalent of Hitler, and it's something the designers and builders couldn't have envisioned when they first started to work on it. Number 9. Promenade House, Shiga, Japan. In 2013, Japanese design studio Koichi Kimura Architects revealed a new family home in Shiga, which shows just what can be done with a small amount of space, but is far from what most people would want from a home. The 2-story promenade house is 88 feet or 27 meters long, but just under 9 feet or 2.7 meters wide. It's an extreme example of how to develop a narrow site, and the interior has been designed in a way to make the space usable. Both floors have rooms that lead out to long corridors. In the words of the architect behind it, as you proceed along the hallway, you will see the spaces spread out one after another. Created for a young couple and their child, the interior has a modern feel, but there's no getting away from how cramped it feels, and it'd surely be preferable to move further out from a city than to have to live somewhere like this. Number 8. Autour de Ride, Mutterschutz, France. Throughout history, houses have been made from a wide range of different materials. Steel, concrete, and brick are of course the most common today, but wood, bamboo, mud, and virtually anything else that's sturdy can hold its shape and has been tried at some point. The creators of this 215 square foot or 20 square meter Autour de Ride in Mutterschutz, France, have taken the notion of trying new materials to a whole new level. Because this house, despite having a core structure of timber, has been wrapped with walls made of corn cobs. The building has been cleverly designed to maximize the amount of sunlight that shines in, with a low-lying north side and a taller south side. But the corncob cladding is what every visitor will unavoidably focus on. The idea here is that the facade blends in with the background and will change over the seasons, and it's even said to effectively keep in the warmth. Luckily, this was only intended as the temporary display of what would be possible, but quite whether the idea of surrounding your home with food that'll probably attract a continual flow of birds, squirrels, and other animals is still to be seen. Number 7. The Fat House Gateshead, UK. In 2006, Austrian artist Erwin Wurm, known for a series of peculiar pieces, revealed his latest design in the town of Gateshead in the UK as part of an exhibition for the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art. Known as the Fat House, it was a home that was built to resemble what a building would look like if it had been sculpted from human fat. It looks soft, bloated, and disgusting, and the artist encouraged visitors to feel every part of it, and if they dared to venture inside. While the concept was to show how unusual a house design could be, the interior was full of equally strange installations, such as a video of the house asking questions of itself, most notably about whether it even counts as being a house in the first place. It is a truly bizarre creation that's fit for an art exhibition, and while it asks some interesting ideas about the concept of design, thankfully these ideas haven't inspired others to build actual homes that look like it. It may be well and fun to begin with, but you'd surely get quickly bored of living in a house that looked like this. Number 6. The no-bedroom house, San Francisco. There are certain things you'd expect from a house in modern times, such as a kitchen, a lounge area, a bathroom, and a place to sleep. So would you ever consider purchasing a property that was missing one of those elements? And even if you did, could it possibly be worth almost $2 million? That's the question people faced in January of 2022 when a building was put on the market in San Francisco, as soon as it was noticed that it was completely devoid of a bedroom. It was even marketed as the worst house on the best block in the city, and it may not be a surprise that it was eventually purchased by a developer who plans to tear it down and start all over again. The property was originally built in 1900 and, after falling into a state of disrepair, was said to have 0 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that appears to date to the Second World War. Despite the boarded-up building being in a terrible state, the price tag was generally seen as worth it, and quite an indictment on the state of the property market in the No Valley neighborhood of the city. The new owner stood to make a fortune because newly renovated single-family homes nearby can easily sell for between $4 and $6 million. Number 5. Kivivik Igloos, Faroe Islands, Denmark. A territory of Denmark, the Faroe Islands is an archipelago that's in the northern Atlantic, around 200 miles or 320 kilometers to the north-northwest of Scotland. They are remote islands with very little development on them, and in 2021 a Danish engineer revealed a new concept for self-sustained cabins that could be built there. Inspired by igloos, but without using any ice or snow in their construction, the Kivivik igloos are heptagonal units made with asphalt panels lining the exterior that's designed to create a nesting place for animals and encourage the growth of moss and grass. In theory, the igloos will become covered with the same vegetation that grows on the ground and will look like their natural formations, something that will also help with insulation too. Despite these lofty ambitions of the designs, there's no avoiding the fact that these igloos aren't exactly the best-looking homes ever envisioned, and even if they do become covered in greenery in the way that's planned, they'll look like strange bumps pushing through the earth. With the skepticism surrounding them, permission was only given to build a couple to see how it goes first before committing to many more. But this is hardly a concept that's going to take off anywhere other than places like the Faroe Islands, where resources are limited. Number 4. The Dumpster Home, New York. New York City is a highly developed area where there's very little opportunity for building a new place to live. And for most people, the properties on offer are far too expensive to ever dream of affording. Space comes at a premium too, where studio apartments used to be an extreme, and more recently, the concept of micro-apartments has become much more common. But in 2013, a designer decided to build one of the strangest homes the city's ever seen, a converted dumpster. Gregory Clone took a $2,000 dumpster, gutted the interior, and added a living space, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a barbecue, and even a deck. The home even still has its wheels, so it can be pushed from place to place. and it also has a self-contained water tank to feed the systems inside. There's no doubt that this was an ingenious idea that made use of the available space in a novel way and gave a practical way to have some privacy in the city. But at the end of the day, if you had a property like this, you'd still be living in a dumpster, and it's doubtful there's anyone who's aspiring for that to be their home. Number 3. The Spaceship House, Signal Mountain, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thanks to science fiction stories and our continued exploration of space, people have believed for a long time that not only do aliens exist elsewhere in the universe, but they may have already visited us on our planet. While you may or may not believe this, there are some places you can go to see a UFO, albeit one that's been built by a human. The Spaceship House, which is on Signal Mountain in Tennessee, was built by Curtis King in 1972 for his son. Costing an estimated $250,000, it has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, a full bar and an entertainment area, and a drop-down staircase for access. To keep to the theme, everything inside the Spaceship House is rounded, which gives the whole place a strangely circular feel to it. And there's a surprising 2,000 square feet or 186 meters of space inside. Surprisingly, once the family were tired of it, they were able to sell it at a profit, and it's changed hands a number of times since, which is a good indication that it isn't the best place to live. Built mainly from concrete and steel, it's not entirely practical. A neighbor once said in an interview that they had seen a couple that lived there having an argument, and the wife decided to run out and drive her husband's tow truck underneath the staircase after it had risen, which essentially trapped him in there until she had forgiven him. Now, the Spaceship House definitely is a great example of style over substance, and even though it seems fun at first, it really hasn't all been designed for a comfortable living. Number 2. The Leaning Buildings of Santos, Brazil. Architects study for years to understand the best ways to design buildings and the potential pitfalls that may be encountered and must be overcome. Despite this, some buildings are destined to fail from the start, and that was the case with a series of high-rise apartment buildings along the coastline of Santos in Brazil. You'll notice from just looking at the skyline that something isn't quite right, and that's because a number of them are no longer straight and have tilted to one side. Seemingly forgetting the lessons of the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy, the Leaning Buildings of Santos are the result of there being no building regulations in the city before 1968, which let developers do virtually whatever they wanted. In that area of Santos, on the surface, there's 23 feet or 7 meters of sand, and below this there's a 131-foot or 40-meter layer of slippery clay. Typically, you'd want the foundations of a large building like this to reach the bedrock, which is beneath this layer of clay and sand, but because the regulations in place when these structures were built, the foundations rarely go further than 16 feet or 5 meters down. With so many buildings so close to each other, the problem of sinking is exacerbated by what's happening elsewhere. There are almost 100 buildings showing signs of movement, and in some cases they lean up to 6 feet or 2 meters. It is possible but extremely expensive to put them straight, so the decision has been made to leave them as they are, and then plenty of people still seem willing to live in them. There is, however, a legend in Santos that if one building collapses, it'll trigger a domino effect that'll knock them all over. And while experts have said there's no way that this can happen, they sure look as if they're about to topple. Number 1. The Carrot House, Warsaw, Poland. When choosing a house to live in, we all have to decide what features are most important to us. And usually you'd expect that to live in or near a city, you'd probably have to sacrifice on certain aspects of quality of life or the amount of interior space. This has been taken to the absolute extreme in the capital city of Poland, Warsaw, where a designer has built what's believed to be the narrowest house in the world. The city itself is full of architecture from different time periods, and space is not something that you'll find in abundance. The Carrot House was built between 2 existing structures and was originally proposed by architect Jakub Szczesny as a concept during an architectural festival in 2009. It garnered such attention, though, that it was built for real and is just 4 feet or 1.22 meters at its widest point. Inside, there's just about enough room for a bed and very little else. It's so cramped and claustrophobic that after completing it, it was proving impossible to find anyone that actually wanted to live in it for an extended period of time. This now means that instead of being a permanent residence, the Carrot House is instead given to traveling writers and artists who are looking for the opportunity to live in the center of the city and experience everything it has to offer. It's a great way to take in the sights and sounds of Warsaw, but you'll surely be yearning for larger rooms and an open-plan house. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.